G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and I also run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we specialise in helping property investors start out and scale up their investment property portfolios. Being on the journey as an investor, there are some turning points in your journey, and one of those often comes down to how should I be buying this next property? So say, for example, you've got the borrowing capacity, and now we're trying to maybe minimize tax or become more tax effective, or we're thinking about developments, for example, or different buying structures is the very banky word for it. The person you want to speak to is an accountant, and we are fortunate to be joined in the studio today by a gun accountant, accountant with loads of personality, pseudo YouTube star as well. I'm talking about Davie Mach from Box Advisory Services. G'day, Davie.
Hey, nice to meet you, man.
Great to have you here, mate.
Cool.
Look, mate, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for some time, seeing you grow personally, seeing you grow professionally as well. I can say, super proud of your success. I know you don't take that as an inflated sense of self because you had such great value. This is naturally always going to happen, right? So to be awarded Young Accountant of the Year, again, is a byproduct of you showing up, caring for people, giving good advice, and the outcome takes care of itself, yeah?
Yeah, I agree. So the last 3 years has been really tough because of COVID and clients crying and asking us for help with, their business turned upside down in the last 3 years. And it's been tough, but I felt like it was a sense of duty. I feel like accountants, they had to be they had to push aside their personal wants and needs and just focus purely on the businesses. Yeah, so it's been tough. And previously before this podcast, I was just telling you the last 3 years have been really tough for us. But I feel like I've achieved a lot over the last 3 years, and I'm super proud of my team, as well as the clients out there that we've been helping.
I love the sentiment, right? Because it gets to the stage, it's not about how great business is or how great we are, for example. There is, I guess, when the doors are shut and it's us, with our business and with our team, for example, it's how we show up. And we've been blessed that, your business has probably, I wouldn't say grown. Our business has grown in the last 3 years thanks to COVID. Yep. So there's a blessing and a curse that comes out. Yep, we're busy. Yep, we're probably some people overworked. And then you go, well, there's some businesses that were heavily impacted out of their control. And here we are in a role to help serve them and be there for them as well, which is, it's a wonderful sentiment, mate. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and I feel like it's starting to get better, but now there's all over the news is talking about another recession.
We'll go from how great things are and the market's out of control for everyone to doom and gloom. And part of our roles is very much deciphering what people hear and going, one, we can't control that. Two, there'll always be opportunities off the back of that. So how do we see it, for example, and what are we projecting to our clients in terms of, are we giving them confidence or are we talking them out of opportunities as well? And so, that's a very fine balance. And some accountants will buy into the sky is falling as brokers may, or someone go, you know what? You've sat on the sidelines for 2.5 years, not able to get into the market. This is the opportunity that you've been waiting for. So call it rising rates, call it softening market. That's a blessing in disguise as well, right?
Yeah, I see that as well. And a mortgage broker recently, or not recently, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when the Royal Commission happened. Yeah. They mentioned, I asked them how they were going and how they're feeling, are they okay? Because I was a bit worried about their profession. And then they said to me, Davie, I actually think I'm doing better than ever before. And he said that, yes, there are problems. Yes, there are rules and regulations that are changing our industry, but the ones that are rising above it are the ones that are going to stand out. And it pretty much clears the way for all the good guys. Yeah. So I think it's an opportunity. That's what he said. It's an opportunity for us to do better. Yeah. And I think when that happened, when COVID happened for us accountants, we just, I sat there and just went, oh my God, this is a perfect opportunity for me. This is the time. Yeah. So
I call accountants the rock stars of COVID because everyone wants to hear from their accountant during COVID. Yeah. Right? Especially, you serve a lot of small, medium businesses. What I won't say benefits, but what government support packages are we eligible for? What can we claim? How does it work? And a lot of that information, they weren't doing great training or handovers for accountants. You had to literally find the answers out as much as information we had access to, right?
Yeah,
so
literally.
a lot of resourcefulness on the accountant's behalf.
Yeah, every single week there was an update on the legislation, or they went back at what they said previously and changed that, and then things were just changing constantly. So, and the crazy thing was, I still remember the day where a legislation, or not even a legislation, the Prime Minister just had a chat about like things that are going to change, and they haven't even implemented it. And then my phone starts ringing right after it, like literally started ringing for like a whole week because like all these changes, because JobKeeper, JobSaver, you know, all those job grants that were there. Yeah, so it's great. Yeah, but a lot has changed. And I think during those times, and as you know, there was a lot of talk about property. There's a lot of movement about property and lending as well.
Absolutely, mate. Before we do get into it, it's what I call the 3 Ps. A little bit about yourself personally, professionally, and your own property journey as well, if you can indulge.
Cool. Sounds great. So I've been doing accounting for about 15 plus years.
Yeah. I know the baby-faced accountant.
Yes, I know. The baby-faced. I started when I was 17. And
started when you were 7.
7 or 17, whatever. But my parents, like, we grew up quite poor. And when I was 15, I kind of realized that mum and dad were paying for my tuition fees through credit cards. And they did a very bad thing where they just kept like, you know, withdrawing cash out of the credit cards because their only way of payment is cash. They didn't know how to make payments for EFT. Didn't even know how to log on to internet banking. So they just kept withdrawing cash. And when you draw cash from your credit card, you get charged extra fees. So they did that with my oldest brother, my second oldest, and then myself. So as you can see, by the end of it, they just broke down. Like, I think when I was 15, I was playing games, didn't have a care of the world because I was doing all right in school. They came down and had a chat with me. They were having constantly, always, every week having fights. And I just thought it was just normal. As long as I kept to myself, it'll be all good. And then dad came in and my mom was shouting at him saying, don't talk to Davie, don't bring Davie into this. And he sat me down and said, son, we're not doing well. And he told me the whole story about mum's sick. And that's the reason why we can't work. And we've just actually literally been paying your tuition and your education, everything through just credit cards and now debt. So they didn't tell me then, but they did refinance their property, and they refinanced using like a private lender. And I found out, you know, literally about 5 years ago, it was like the interest rate was really high. And 5 years ago, this is like, I'm talking about 10 plus years ago. So the interest rate was always high for the last.
Oh, correct.
Yeah. So from there, I was pretty depressed about it. And then from 15 to 17, I was like, you know, I need to get out and get a job. I need to make sure I go to uni, need to do whatever I needed for the family. And my brothers at that time already finished high school. They were already working and studying at the same time. They all went to uni. So yeah, I just got a scholarship and I got a cadetship. And I chose the cadetship path because I made $25,000 and I thought that was a lot of money.
Great cadetships, yeah.
So I went into accounting straight away. So I've been doing that for like 15 years. And I was 26 when I started my own accounting practice. It was kind of forced upon me because my previous boss sold his business and merged with KPMG. And I just didn't want to be part of KPMG. I liked working for small businesses. I enjoy it. And working for KPMG wasn't something that I really wanted to do. It wasn't my lifelong dream. So I just left, and my clients, you know, eventually followed me.
Well, mate. I mean, thank you very much for sharing. That's laying your soul bare there, mate. And they're tough conversations to have with parent to child at any age, let alone at 15, right? And I'm sure your parents came to this country with hopes and dreams, you know, to give you guys a better life. And then ultimately what happens, you know, first generation, we'll go on a completely different tangent here, but first generation parents come out here for us, right? To give us a better life and they go through hardships and struggles on the way through. It's tough.
So I feel like it's like a sense of like, it's guilty. Like for me, I feel a lot of guilt. And as a result of that, I just feel like it's a sense I have to do this. I have to make this work.
This has to work.
Yeah. So that's where we are now.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
And yeah, show me a bit of fire in the belly and a bit of hunger in the belly and look what happens, right?
Yeah. And to me, it's a blessing in disguise. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, well done. And you also mentioned that your respective partner is now working in the business, so you've crossed blurred lines just like I have and we did.
Yes.
But it works, right? I mean, your partner, we're there to support them, they're there to support us, and they get the trials and tribulations of going through, setting up your business.
Same with you. Probably we wouldn't have been where we are without him.
100%.
100%.
I mean, I would have spent all the money and I would have
I wouldn't have
got
started
the Guinness. And we wouldn't have a business today probably if it wasn't for my partner. But
I needed the support, and as like she pretty much runs the whole business. She's the big boss now.
Beautiful.
So I'd say.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
well done, mate. Excellent. I want to kind of get into it because I know you've got so much knowledge in your head. I want to try and pull that out. And dealing a lot with self-employed clients, for example, we've had the benefit of dealing with plenty of self-employed, and there's a very delicate relationship balance between the accountant and the broker, for example, because I won't say we're competing, but different perspectives. We want to try and get the maximum borrowing capacity. Sometimes the brief is they want to pay less tax. I'm like, well, you pay less tax, you show less income, the less you can borrow, right? So take me through when you're having those conversations with clients, and I'm gonna say that you're gonna have mature conversations. Are you looking to do some lending? What are you looking to do the next 12, 18 months? Because these financials will then be around for a while. How do you reframe that conversation with someone that's self-employed going, I just want to pay less tax? And you're like, that's too short-sighted sometimes as well.
Yeah. So I always ask them questions.
Yeah.
Like I don't tell them what to do. I ask them questions of what they want.
Yeah.
So a client will come up to me usually, and it's happening already in May and June. It's because we are currently at the end of financial year, and they would ask, hey, Davie, how much tax am I paying? I don't want to pay any tax, or I want to pay zero tax, or I want to get a refund. And I would say first, why do you want the refund? Why do you want to pay as little tax as possible? They said, I'm looking at buying a property. I want to invest. I want to buy my home. I want to get married. And that a whole bunch of questions I asked them. And then the end result is always, I want to build my family up, or I want to build the future. It's always a long-term game.
Yeah.
So I say, well, if you're thinking long-term, do you know that minimizing your tax and paying zero tax whatsoever is actually going to have a detrimental effect for you in the long term? And like, how so? And I say, well, if I lodge these taxes for you at zero tax, let's just say that I do that, which I don't anyway.
Yeah.
What would happen is that for the next 12 months, not even probably 12, 18 months, you're not going to be able to go to the bank. You can. You probably have to go to a private lender or someone.
Specialist lender that's going to play in that space.
Yep. Yeah. And then I would say that your interest rate will be probably maybe 1 to 2% higher.
Yeah.
And let's do the maths, 1 to 2% of $1 million, $1 million loan.
That's right. Yeah.
You're paying, 10 to 20.
You are paying for the privilege. Yeah.
You're paying $10,000 to $20,000 extra. $10,000 to $20,000, might as well just pay the tax.
Yes.
And that's when they go.
It opens up all your lender options, for example.
Yeah. And then that's where they go, oh, you know what? That makes sense. But sometimes they say to me, I'm not planning to get a loan right now. And I'd say, well, what about 18 months later? Because we're still using the same numbers.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to lodge your tax return
straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where they start thinking differently. And I say, look, you got to plan it differently. In business, you've got the opportunity to show taxes and show your income and you can not play with your income, but you can
you've work out options. So once you get to a certain stage, you've got options that then come with a good problem, which is a tax problem.
Yes.
And this is the challenge, right? So we'll draw an arbitrary number, say 100,000. Let's be real, you're not paying that much tax. You don't have to lose sleep at night, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you had 100K, self-employed, just pay the tax and let's have champagne problems, which is good problems about how to minimize tax in the future. But if the goal is then, hey, minimize tax, well, there isn't that much tax to minimize. And I don't want to sound rude, but that's obviously your domain and you've got to have those conversations, right?
Yeah. So there are we always plan to minimize tax. It's just that we got to see the end picture and your long-term goal. And if your long-term goal, minimizing tax is going to cause a detrimental impact to it, then we'll give you the options. We always give them options in the end. And these are the options, your decision. And there's nothing dodgy about it. It's just look, you're making 100K, but if you spend $20,000 to buy a car, then your profit's going to be $80,000. So as a result, your tax is less, but you could have spent that next year, or after you bought your house, then that Like it would increase your borrowing capacity because you would have 100K income rather than 80.
Correct.
They're the things that we're talking about. There's nothing dodgy about it. It's all legal. Everything's fine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, accounts have to play, just like bros have to play with a pretty straight bat, right? Like you're pretty black and white. You can play in grey areas, but at some point, you don't want those grey areas to find you out as well, right?
Yeah, it's not worth the risk. Like I've been doing this for 15 years. It's just not worth it. Like I've studied hard.
Correct.
You know, I have
you've got a team now, so team are relying on you doing the right thing as a business as well, and clients want you around. And I use the word sustained success in any business. You take shortcuts, you're not going to have sustained success. Just like in anything in life, if you're not eating well, sleeping well, you're going to have those shortcuts, and eventually it's going to catch up with you as well, right?
Yeah, you want to build a long-term relationship, and that's my goal. Yeah. Like I've never always want to make a quick profit, a quick dollar. So I want to build this long-term relationship, and I always tell our clients, I'm here for the long run, and that's what you want for an accountant. So I'm going to give you the right advice for like and follow you through your lifelong dreams. Like not just make a quick buck, get you that loan, and then see you later for the next 5 years because I've lost my license or you run your business down.
Totally.
Yeah. So totally 100%.
Perfect. And I mentioned, we do a lot with investors, for example. I know you do with property investors. When it gets to the stage you're looking to buy, and quite often it's like, we've got one property under their belt, then like, oh, look, I might try and buy under a trust, for example. And I was like, okay, is this advice you're getting from your accountant? Is this something that you think is right? Again, asking questions about what they're looking to do. Why would you do it, for example? And again, it's on a very case-by-case basis. But from your perspective, when you're having that conversation with the client, when is that a relevant buying structure to buy through a trust, for example?
So trust is it's set up in a way where you've got a trust deed. And so it's pretty much governed by the trust deed. No one actually knows who the beneficiaries are. Yeah. And that's the great thing about it as well. So not many people know who is the owners and who are the beneficiaries, who are the pointers and the controllers of the trust. So a lot of people set up a trust because of the ambiguity of it as well. They want to hide the fact that they're buying a property. So that's one reason. Yeah. When it comes to taxes, there's a lot of taxes that you have to deal with. So there's capital gains tax when you buy and sell a property. A lot of people don't hear much about it, don't think too much about it because they don't plan. Like when you buy a property, most of the time you don't feel like you don't think about selling.
You're not buying and then going, I'm going to sell it straight away. All the energy is going into the buying. You're not even thinking about the selling.
Yeah, so they don't think about that. But there's also income tax, which is when you rent it out and you receive some sort of income. So you have to think about income tax, capital gains, and there's also different other taxes that the government imposes that not many people know about, which is land tax. Yes. So land tax is a state tax. Yeah. So it's not like income tax and capital gains, which is federal. The whole of Australia is charging you. The government, ScoMo right now is charging us that. Yeah. But with land tax, it's a New South Wales tax. And that, depending on which state, has different rules as well. So if you're buying under a family trust, for example, in New South Wales, for example, you don't get a threshold and you get charged 1.6% of the whole land value. And that could be a lot because you have to pay that every single year. It's not like a once-off payment. You pay it every year. A once-off payment will be stamp duty. So when you're transferring the property or buying the property and moving it over to your name, you also need to pay a stamp duty cost to transfer that property over to your name. So there's like 4 taxes that you have to think about. And clients only really know about stamp duty and rental income expenses tax, which is like the income tax. They don't think about the land tax and capital gains. And so for us to decide if it's a family trust is the best move, it's basically that the goal is one day they would like to sell, but they want to distribute it to their family. So if they have a big family and they might want to pass this property over to their kids one day, then a family trust is a really good idea. Because one, you get access to a 50% discount on capital gains tax. 2, you get to distribute the income to your family members. If you have a big family, they will have to be over 18. They have to receive the money as well. And then when it comes to stamp duty, you're going to have to pay it no matter what. The last thing about land tax, it is a detrimental impact of buying it in the family trust. But if you have multiple properties already in your name, you've already passed the land tax free threshold. So then that's the next question we also ask. How far into the property investment are you in? Because if you got multiple properties in your name, then yes, you won't get a land tax free threshold anyway. You're not going to get a benefit from land tax. You're going to pay the same amount of land tax whether it's in your name or in a trust. So therefore buy in a trust.
Yeah.
So they pretty much the things that we ask normally. It's funny though, like the government, however, doesn't like family trust, and they actually I feel like every couple of years they doing something to make it harder for us.
Yeah.
So right now, the advice I'm providing and the information I'm providing, like in a few years' time, it may be even worse off. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And I feel like that's always the case. Like you look at where SMSFs were years ago to where they are now, and they're clamping down a little bit more. So they kind of give that little bit of free rein and see if things don't quite work out. They'll rein it back in, for example, make it tighter, restrict the criteria a little bit more as well.
Yeah. So the government's way of thinking is that family trusts weren't created for a way to minimize tax, but a lot of people have been utilizing it for minimizing tax. And so therefore they're trying to clamp that down, but they can't clamp down straight away and just pretty much knock it back, or they're going to have too much bad feedback. So they do it slowly.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So we go from one trust to, say, unit trusts, and again, we'll see this from time to time because it comes up from a lending perspective. It's quite limiting because there are very few banks that will lend to a unit trust. But for some people out there listening, going, well, what is a unit trust? Can you just kind of give us the lowdown on unit trusts and go through the same type of questioning?
Cool. So unit trust it's similar to a trust, but the beauty of a unit trust is that you have fixed units and you can prove that there is an ownership percentage.
Yep.
Family trust, however, it's owned under the family. You can distribute to any beneficiary. The controller, which is the trustee, determines every year what the profit is and how do we distribute the profits to each beneficiary.
Right.
So year one, you might make 100K, you might give 50-50. And then year two, you might make another 100K, but you decide to give 100% to one. So you could do that with a family trust.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a unit trust, if it's 50-50 ownership, one person owns 50 units and the other one owns the other 50 units, then you have to always, every year, split the profits at 50-50. So that's the difference between a unit trust. The beauty of a unit trust is that the New South Wales land tax, they see it as you pay your own land tax, so there is some sort of threshold if the beneficiary is an individual.
Okay.
So it's great for that. It's also great for a lot of third party, or not third party, like different family groups or
so different
business partners.
Co-purchasing, for example, can help.
Yeah. So I've got a business partner that purchased a commercial property. Because we're unrelated, unrelated in a way where we're not family groups and we make our own business decisions. We've bought 50-50 in a unit trust. He could sell out. He could sell his units out one day. I can buy his units. It's just a lot easier. Or we can split and get a third party in as well. So I've seen unit trusts used when it comes to property development or projects that are quite large that require significant capital. And once the DA or some sort of process goes through, they decide, you know what, we need a third party because we need more cash, or we need a builder. That's where a unit trust is great, because you can have two business partners, then have a third one later on without causing too much issues with taxes.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. The next one is buying through a company. So again, it's another popular one where I'm looking to set up a brand new company purely for the purpose of buying a property in this new company's name. Again, from your experience, when have you seen this, the better option, for example?
Yep. So I love companies. So companies, I'm a bit biased, but there are two main options and scenarios that I see most of the time where you would choose a company. The first one is when you have a high amount of income,
right?
A very large amount of income. You either work for someone and you have a business personally in your personal name, and you're making over 180K or 200K a year, every year. Your tax rate's 45%.
Yeah.
So any other income that you receive from your property, and I'm just talking about property right now in a way that it's very hard to get negative gearing in property these days
because the interest rates are low. The rental yields are typically very strong. So when people look to go negatively geared, I'm like, actually, best you might be neutral.
Yeah, neutral.
If not positive, right?
So that's just like a lot of people talk about negative gearing. So I just want to point out that negative gearing these days, I don't see it happen as much.
Yeah.
And if it does happen, it's very temporary. And then over time, like the rental income increases. And but yeah, we never know. The interest rates might increase really significantly, and then there might be negative gearing. But in this case here, for option one, a company that I would say a company because your income's really high in your personal name. So you don't want to buy a property in your name and get charged the 45% tax rate. Yeah. You want like a cheaper tax rate, which is in the company, which is 30%. And then over time, you can pass the profits to the shareholder when maybe your income is lower later on when you're retiring. Then you can pass dividends over to you, which has a franking credit of 30%. Yeah. So that's one option where your income is too high in your personal name for the next 5 to 10 years because you're still working, and you put it in a company and you get to enjoy the whole 30% tax rate. Land tax, you get a threshold in most states as well. So it's great for that. The downfall of it is the capital gains, like if you ever sell. But when I sometimes ask property investors, they always say, I never want to sell. So they just want to always collect the rent, get the revaluation, refinance the money out.
So it's a very long-term buy and hold strategy.
Yes. Yeah. So the second option is if you're a property developer and you're buying this land or this property, knocking it down, rebuilding, the tax office automatically believes that you're running a business. Okay. So because you're running a business, because you're knocking it down, rebuilding and selling it, then that part where the ATO was assumed that you're running a business, so therefore you're always going to be taxed at the business tax rates, which is either your personal tax rate or your company tax rate at 25%. So a lot of businesses or property developers will I'll just get taxed at 25% instead. Yeah. And there's GST, there's a lot of like risk when you're doing property development. So it's better to put it in a company because a company will protect you. If something goes bad, then you can close down and wind up the company. There is a limited there is some sort of protection for you personally. So I would say that a company is great for property developers because they have the 25% tax rate for the corporate tax rate. You deal with GST, but it's isolated in the company. So if anything bad happens with GST or there's any other issues with suppliers, contractors, even the government, if they, you've done something wrong in terms of the development, you knock something down that you shouldn't have knocked down, they go after the company. So yeah, they're the two options. There's probably plenty more, but I could probably talk for hours.
You definitely, I say when you can, it's a compliment because there's so much knowledge that probably sits in your head, and the scenarios that you've probably gone through with clients going, this can't be the first time this new scenario has come across your desk. Just like with us going, I see what you're looking to do here, but it's what I call unintended consequences. This is going to lead to this, like the capital gains tax. So when you go to subdivide and sell it, you're going to have a CGT issue here, for example. And when you're trying to talk about minimized tax and how you created another tax problem for yourself, it's like you've plugged one hole, but you're then eventually going to have to try and plug another. And so taking a step back and going, but what are you doing and why are you doing it? That's probably the first, personally, the questions I'm asking probably very similar to your chats.
I find that clients come to me and they always have like two options, or three options. And the hard part about it is, hey, option one, which is, buy, develop and rent out, is very different from buying, develop and selling straight away. Spot on. So you would, like in option one, you might prefer a trust. Option two, you might prefer a company. So it's hard because sometimes I give you the advice on, hey, you're going to sell everything, and then the market goes down and you can't sell it.
Exactly. You have to hold it, for example. And I was like, well, that was always bought with the intention to sell, but we're not getting the price we want, or now we've decided to keep it. And it's okay. That in turn is now unintended consequence.
So I give clients these are the options. You decide, but just so you know, once you make that decision, we can't back out of it because the company's set up, the contract signed.
Through. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. You just got to live with it. Yeah, so it's not too big of a deal in the end. Tax in the end, if you ever want to take the money and put it in your personal name, you end up paying the same tax anyway.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
And generally, we're dealing with, you've made money. So this is the other part. I'm telling people, you've got the advantage is that you're coming from a little bit more abundance, which is you've made the money. That's the goal. Pay tax on the way through. Look at the country we live in, right? We don't necessarily want to pay more tax than we have to, but there's also a way of going, look, there's a cost of doing business in this country, and it gives us so much as well. Yeah.
I explain to clients that it's all about the timing of tax when you want to pay it. And because sometimes clients say to me, what's the point of doing all this structuring? I'm just going to pay tax anyway. I say, well, you're saving 15% or 20% now, which means that 20% or 10% or 15% you save, you can use to reinvest and make more money. And then once you've done your job, you've made the money, then you can pay the high amount of tax, and it doesn't matter anymore because hopefully you've got so much money.
That's right. Yeah, now we've got good problems.
Yeah,
great.
But there are ways like, keep it in assets, don't sell, and then like you can delay it until the time you sell, or you don't ever sell and then you let your kids worry about it.
Right. I'll leave that problem to them. Perfect. There's one question I want to ask you, which I get consistently from a lot of clients. So there's two scenarios. I'll play out one, which is I've bought my home, so my current primary place of residence, and I'm going to turn that into an investment and then buy the next one, for example. Now, everyone talks about the capital gains tax of having a prime place of residence, the 6-year rule.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to preface that, we're not giving advice, but it's general in nature, our chat. But the letter of the law says, and I want you to finish the sentence, what is the rule around that primary place of residence and once you move out of it as well?
So let's talk main residence exemption and just the definition. Basically, the ATO says that if you are buying a home like that you're living in or that you own, that you're planning to live in, it's your home. There's a definition on how to work out it's your home. But basically, if you have your belongings or you live in it and you have your address and your bills going to it, that means that that's your home. And because it's a home, it's not an investment, so therefore you don't get taxed on it if you do make a profit on it. So that's how main residence exemption works. However, you only get one
place claim
at one point of time.
Yes.
So you can't choose two. There are some times where there's a overlap
right?
of 3 months or 6 months because you're moving or you're building your home.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's just one. So if you decide in your scenario where you've got this home that you lived in for 5 years of your life, then you decide, you know what, I want to upgrade and I've got kids now, I need a bigger home, so you buy another home.
Yeah.
Buy a nicer one, and you move into that one. In that 5th year mark, starting from there, that turns into an investment property, your previous home.
Yeah.
And now that's not your main residence. You can elect that one to be your main residence still for the next 6 years.
Yeah.
But you lose the chance to elect the second one that you're currently living in as your main residence. So some clients decide, you know what, I'll keep that one as my main residence because I'm going to sell it in 2 years. I don't want to pay the tax. But as a result, then it causes a detrimental impact on your current home you live in. So the current home that you live in now for the first 2 years, because you decided the other one is going to be your main residence, the first 2 years it's considered an investment property, and then the main residence exemption starts from there. So if you decide to live in there for another 8 years, then 2 out of the 10 is a investment property. So the tax office say 20% of the profit that you make on the second home, if you ever decide to sell, it is taxable. Yeah.
So they'll just say a percentage as opposed to. So the question is, well, that property didn't increase in value for the first 2 years. We're still paying 20% on the upside of the sale. Is there the workaround to go, well, hang on, the valuation, we bought it was here and the valuation in 2 years' time.
So which property are you referring to?
So the second home. So the second home that we've mentioned. So the original home, and this would probably do better with a pen and paper to write this out. So the example that you had was the original home was then turned into an investment. The home that we upgraded and moved into, the first 2 years was considered an investment because we claimed the primary place, main home previously.
Yep.
So the first 2 years is when it's considered an investment. But let's say the market was soft during that time. Do you get a chance to rebut
and say that the property didn't go up?
The property didn't go up in value. Is there a chance to then minimise?
I think there could be a way.
And I'm really putting on your spot here. So obviously you'd do research if someone came to you. But
I think there's a lot of factors that change it. But I believe in this case, the intention, it has changed. It's now your home. But then there is an increase. And I believe in this situation, it's a proportion. You actually have to proportion it. There are cases where I get where you're coming from, where there's a scenario change and your intention change where you get a market value. That happens when, for example, you lived in this property for quite a long time. Let's just say this is a completely different scenario. You lived in a property for 5 years and then you decide after 5 years, I can do a DA on this and subdivide it and sell both of them at a higher value.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, like it was your home for 5 years, but on that 5th year, you change your intention. Now it's going to be a property development or investment property. As a result, then you do a valuation, and then that at that time of change of intention, that's the cost base now. That's where that scenario comes in. But it's very confusing. There's so many different cases. There is that third option where you decide in the 5th year of you moving out of the first home back to the first scenario. That one is going to be your main residence up to the 5th years. But after that, for the next 2 years, you decide that your second home is going to be your main residence.
Yes.
Then as a result, when you sell your first property, you would have to pay a bit of tax as well. The proportionate method, which is 5 out of the 7 years will be tax-free, 2 out of the 7 will be tax-free.
Yeah.
So you do a proportion method as well. But then the great thing is that your current home that you're living in, the new one, is going to be main residence exempt 100%.
Yeah.
If you don't decide to do the same thing with the next home. Yeah.
Drums. And again, you mentioned there's a whole criteria what deems your primary place of residence. So we get some clients that maybe they've sold, maybe they've moved to the state for work, and now they want to come back to their previous home, but then they want to sell it.
Yeah.
And they go, well, hang on, what's the minimum time that I need to have this on paper? Or
that's a great question, because that's what we were referring to 6-year rule, and we didn't actually talk about that. So there's actually a cool exemption. Which is that if you only have one home and you elect that home to be your main residence, you have 6 years, even if you move out, to still consider that your main residence.
Yes.
And the reason why they do that, the government does that, is because people in life decide on a lot of things that are like in their life, and it changes where they live.
Yeah.
For example, they might go work overseas.
Yeah.
For example, they might pop out a few kids and decide, you know what, I can't do this on my own. I need to go back to mum and dad. So mum and dad can look after our kids as well while we work. So they might move back to mum and dad's place. Yeah. So, and they rent out the current home they're living in.
Yeah.
You still have 6 years from the day you move out to consider that your main residence. The cool thing is that after that 6 years goes by, you can move back in and live there for 6 months or 12 months, and then move back out again. Then your 6 years starts again.
Yeah.
So that's great. So if going back to scenario 1 where you don't actually buy a new home, you move back home, then you could elect for the whole, time you've owned it for the 7 years, the 5th 5 years of you're living in it, and then the next 2 years of you moving out, you can still elect that to be your main residence and have the whole thing 100% tax free, which is pretty cool with the whole 6 year rule. Just got to be careful, speak to an accountant, because it gets very confusing. Yeah.
And I guess any mortgage, it's something that could be open to interpretation, right? So that many accountants, that many different perspectives, that many different experiences, it can be open to interpretation. But there's the letter of the law, and there's how people interpret it.
Yeah.
And there's also, what did you actually do? Because there's also some things in life that you just can't change. You were overseas, or you live in that property. Or again, the taxes that pay to play type scenario.
There is also another option where you decide to rent it. You rent part of your home. The weird thing about this is that it's quite one-sided, but I also understand the reason why the ATO does this is that if you decide to still live in the property and you rent out a portion of it, which is maybe your bedroom, and then you collect the rent and you pay the tax on that rental income, unfortunate thing is that your property isn't 100% main residence anymore.
Yeah.
So they would say that, for that portion of you renting it out, they'll work it out in square meters and work out a percentage of that bedroom, for example. And let's just say that the bedroom works out to be 20% of your actual building and your home. They would say that if you ever decide to sell, 20% will be still taxable for the time that you decide to rent it. So it's weird because the 6 year rule, you'll get a full exemption if you move out, right?
Yeah.
Even though you rent it, you can still rent it even though you moved out and live at mum and dad's place, and you still get the whole full exemption. But because of the fact that you live in it and you rent it out, you have to pay a bit of tax. Very strange, but I think the ATO's reason is because
you were income producing.
Yeah, you're producing income, so it's a different story. Yeah.
Hey, thanks very much. I can see I say to people, I can hear you thinking, and I can see your mind just ticking over because this is your world, right? And again, it speaks to the knowledge that you've built over the last 15, 16 years in your industry, applying your trade. So I appreciate you kind of shooting from the hip there a little bit to put you on the spot with that question, but just want to say thanks very much for your wisdom, mate. And
no problems, man.
I really appreciate it.
Don't ask me too many hard more questions.
Cool. No, mate, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you jumping into the studio to share with us as well. If you do want to reach out to Davie and his team at Box Advisory Services, we'll include a link to all their socials and their website as well. Davie's a wonderful guy. He's got a great team around him. So kind of building that whole, his time is busy and, you probably hit a capacity where you go, look, this is the amount of clients that I can service, but we have a great team that's here to help serve and build up your team, but also build up your great client base as well.
Yeah, and a lot of these questions we actually answer it on YouTube. So my YouTube is Davie Mach. You can search it on YouTube.
Beautiful.
And we go through all the property questions and tax, and hopefully it answers the question. But best thing you should do is seek advice before you make a decision. You don't have to seek it like a year in advance, but just the timing of when you're purchasing is probably a good idea.
Yeah, and I guess the reason that we maybe put this on a podcast or put this on YouTube is every client will absorb information very differently. Some will listen to it and understand it. Some will see and absorb it. And then some need to kind of draw it out to then feel it and go, yeah, I can understand the concept here as well. So think, feel and do is kind of what we say to a lot of people when they're trying to learn a new concept as well, because we do this daily, but we don't take it for client. Granted that clients come to us, once a year or every second year as well. So Davie, thanks very much for sharing. I really hope you found this episode helpful. Like I said, if you have, we want to hear from you. Give us a comment or give us a review as well. And look forward to bringing you another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast very soon. Thanks very much.